You never close your eyes.
I feel the need for speed. When Top Gun exploded into theaters in 1986, it didn't just introduce fighter jets and aviator sunglasses to pop culture. It reshaped how America saw heroism, masculinity, and power in the middle of the Cold War. On screen, it was all confidence, speed, and sweat-soaked bravado. But behind the camera, the production was walking a razor's edge between spectacle and disaster. Real fighter jets were pushed beyond safe limits. Military officials rewrote scenes behind closed doors. Actors clashed, egos collided, and at one point, the film's biggest star came dangerously close to being removed from the project altogether. What looked like pure Hollywood fantasy was built on real risk, real manipulation, and carefully hidden compromises. Today, we're uncovering the facts that never made it into the official story, the decisions that nearly derailed the film, the truths that reframed it from entertainment into something far more calculated. And stay with us until the end, because the final revelation ties Top Gun to a legacy far bigger and far darker than a summer blockbuster. This isn't just a movie story. This is what was happening behind the fact. Number 1. The film was born from a magazine article. Top Gun did not begin as a bold Hollywood invention. Its foundation came from a 1983 magazine article titled Top Guns, written by journalist Ehud Yonah. The piece documented the real-life U.S. Navy fighter weapons school at Miramar, California, focusing on elite pilots, competitive egos, and high-risk aerial training that bordered on obsession. Producers Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer immediately recognized the cinematic potential and purchased the rights. What most audiences never realized was how directly the film lifted from reality. Specific aerial encounters, pilot rivalries, and even personality archetypes were drawn almost verbatim from Yonah's reporting. Hollywood didn't imagine Maverick's recklessness, it refined it. Without that article, there would be no framework for the story, no culture of airborne bravado to exaggerate, and no myth to polish. What appeared to be stylized fantasy was, in truth, an edited version of real naval life, reshaped to fit a blockbuster mold. The movie didn't invent the legend, it inherited one and amplified it. Number 2. The Pentagon had script approval. The U.S. Navy was never a passive advisor on Top Gun. From the earliest drafts, military officials demanded direct script approval before granting Paramount access to aircraft carriers, fighter jets, and trained pilots. Any scene that suggested recklessness, incompetence, or moral ambiguity within the ranks was flagged or rewritten. Early versions of the script portrayed pilots as dangerously impulsive and occasionally negligent. Those drafts were rejected outright. Even the death of Goose became a negotiation point. The Navy insisted the accident be framed as a mechanical failure rather than pilot error, preserving the image of flawless training and discipline. The agreement was clear. Paramount received access to military hardware worth billions of dollars. In return, the Navy received a version of itself presented as heroic, disciplined, and aspirational. Officially, it wasn't propaganda. Functionally, it operated exactly like it. The result was a film that looked authentic while carefully filtering reality through institutional approval. Number 3. The movie became a recruitment weapon. The impact was immediate. When Top Gun opened in theaters, U.S. Navy recruitment booths appeared outside cinemas across the country. The film didn't just entertain audiences, it redirected them. Enrollment inquiries, particularly for aviation programs, surged dramatically in the months following the release. This was not accidental. The Pentagon understood the power of image, and Top Gun delivered a fantasy of elite masculinity, brotherhood, and purpose at precisely the right cultural moment. The jets, the confidence, the authority, it sold a lifestyle, not a job. What audiences believed was escapism functioned as one of the most effective recruitment tools in modern American history. The movie blurred the line between cinema and messaging so seamlessly that most viewers never questioned it. Top Gun didn't ask young men to enlist. It made them want to. Number 4. Tom Cruise almost walked away from the film. Before Tom Cruise became synonymous with Maverick, he nearly rejected Top Gun entirely. When the script first crossed his desk, Cruise reportedly dismissed it as shallow, a glossy fantasy about cocky pilots with little emotional weight. At the time, he was more interested in serious dramatic roles, not what he saw as a vanity-driven action film. Everything changed when producer Jerry Bruckheimer arranged a real flight in a Navy jet. Crews was subjected to brutal G-forces, disoriented midair, and physically sick after landing. Instead of being discouraged, he was electrified. The experience reframed the project for him. This wasn't just acting, it was physical survival. Once committed, Cruise became relentless. He pushed to fly as much as the Navy would allow, pressuring pilots and production alike. His insistence on authenticity went beyond performance. It set the tone for the entire shoot. The same obsession that elevated the film also strained the production, pushing safety limits and creating tension with Navy officials who worried he was taking risks for the camera. Number 5. Val Kilmer's rivalry wasn't acting. Val Kilmer never wanted to play Iceman. Fresh from serious stage work, he viewed the role as one-dimensional and only accepted it due to contractual obligations. Once on set, his lack of enthusiasm translated into cold detachment, an attitude that would become central to the character. What audiences perceived as scripted rivalry between Maverick and Iceman was largely genuine. Kilmer kept his distance, avoided camaraderie, and leaned into dismissive body language. Cruise, by contrast, was hyper-focused, intense, and constantly present. The clash wasn't manufactured, it was organic. Directors didn't need to direct their tension, cameras captured it. The rivalry added realism, but it also fractured the cast dynamic. Two opposing energies collided daily, turning the cockpit competition into a real psychological standoff. The film benefited from it. The people making it paid the price. Number 6. The inverted jet scene was inspired by reality. One of Top Gun's most infamous moments, Maverick flipping his jet upside down over an enemy aircraft, wasn't pure fantasy. It was inspired by real anecdotes from Navy pilots who described dangerously close encounters during Cold War training exercises. Recreating the maneuver required precision flying at terrifying proximity. While the scene was staged more safely than real-life incidents, the margin for error was still razor-thin. The Navy initially resisted, citing unacceptable risk. Director Tony Scott fought to keep it, arguing that the moment defined Maverick's character more than any line of dialogue ever could. What viewers saw as swagger was, in reality, choreography balanced on discipline and danger. The shot wasn't just spectacle. It was a statement about ego, defiance, and how close the production itself was flying to disaster. Number 7. The director literally bought a sunset. The visual identity of Top Gun did not happen by accident. Director Tony Scott was obsessed with light, atmosphere, and mood, especially the way sunset reflected off steel and ocean. During filming aboard an active aircraft carrier, Scott requested the ship be turned to catch the sun at a specific angle. The captain refused. Fuel costs were too high, and the request was operationally unnecessary. Scott didn't argue. He wrote a personal check on the spot, reportedly for $25,000, and handed it to the captain. The ship turned. That single decision produced some of the most iconic imagery in the film: golden hour jets, silhouetted pilots, a mythic glow that elevated Top Gun from action movie to visual fantasy. What audiences never knew was that the look defining the entire film was not approved through normal channels. It was purchased, not with studio money, but with personal desperation to get the shot. Number 8. Goose's death reflected a real aviation fear. Goose's death remains one of the film's most jarring moments. It arrives suddenly, without heroics, and leaves Maverick broken. What made the scene unsettling wasn't just the emotion, it was how closely it mirrored real aviation tragedies. The Navy insisted the incident be portrayed as a mechanical malfunction, not human error. But even within those constraints, the scene captured a deeper truth. Sometimes, training, skill, and discipline don't matter. Death is random. Actor Anthony Edwards later admitted the scene disturbed him more than expected. Watching the playback felt less like fiction and more like a memorial. Goose wasn't just a character. He represented the uncomfortable reality the Navy preferred not to emphasize the fact that even the best pilots are vulnerable. The film acknowledged that truth briefly, then moved on. But the weight of it lingered, both on-screen and behind it. Number 9. The volleyball scene was never meant to exist. The beach volleyball sequence, now endlessly parodied and analyzed, was not part of the original script. Studio executives demanded something else: more energy, more sex appeal, more visual heat. The result was a scene designed less as storytelling and more as branding. Tony Scott filmed it like a commercial. Oiled bodies, slow motion, music pounding, competition framed as intimacy. When executives first saw the footage, they hated it. They called it pointless and disconnected from the narrative. Scott argued it captured the film's true dynamic, rivalry disguised as camaraderie. He won the argument. The scene stayed. What was meant as a studio-mandated addition became one of the most recognizable moments in the film, not because it advanced the story, but because it revealed something deeper. Beneath the jets and missions, Top Gun was always about image. The volleyball scene just made that explicit. Number 10. Future stars were treated as background noise. At the time of production, several cast members who would later become major Hollywood figures were considered expendable. Meg Ryan, cast as Goose's wife, had limited screen time and minimal narrative importance. She was hired cheaply, viewed as functional rather than memorable. The same applied to Tim Robbins, who appeared briefly as Merlin. His role barely registered during production. There was no sense that either actor would go on to define an era of American cinema. This wasn't coincidence. Paramount deliberately filled secondary roles with unknowns to control costs. What the studio didn't anticipate was that Top Gun would later be re-examined as a snapshot of unrealized stardom. Characters once treated as disposable became proof that the film unintentionally launched careers it barely acknowledged at the time. Number 11. The real pilots were paid almost nothing. While the studio spent millions on music licensing, reshoots, and marketing, the Navy pilots responsible for the film's most dangerous aerial footage were paid a fraction of that cost. Each pilot reportedly received less than $8,000 for their participation. These were not simulated flights. Every barrel roll, dive, and near collision was performed in real aircraft under real risk without digital assistance. CGI didn't exist to save them. If something went wrong, it went wrong at hundreds of miles per hour. One pilot later described the experience bluntly: they weren't actors, they were stunt doubles with wings. Their work defined the film's realism, yet their compensation barely reflected the danger involved. Top Gun's most authentic moments were built on underpaid risk, quietly absorbed by men whose names never appeared above the title. Number 12. Height differences became a production problem. Romantic chemistry on screen often hides practical manipulation behind the camera. Kelly McGillis, who played Charlie, stood several inches taller than Tom Cruise. This created a visual imbalance the filmmakers were determined to hide. To compensate, Cruise was frequently placed on apple boxes, asked to wear boots with elevated soles, or framed at precise angles. In intimate scenes, McGillis was sometimes instructed to go barefoot. Lighting and blocking were carefully adjusted to maintain the illusion. Despite the effort, McGillis later admitted that the off-screen connection wasn't always there. Cruise was intensely focused on performance and career trajectory, not romance. But the Navy had insisted Maverick have a civilian love interest. The relationship was mandatory. What appeared effortless on screen was, in reality, the result of technical calculation. Not passion, but production logistics kept their characters eye to eye. Number 13. The Navy charged the studio by the hour. Access to real fighter jets came at a price, and it was not symbolic. The U.S. Navy charged Paramount approximately $11,000 per flight hour for the use of F-14 Tomcats. That fee covered fuel, maintenance, and operational costs, but it added up fast. Across the shoot, the total ran into the millions. Producers joked they were burning money at Mach speed. At one point, the studio quietly debated using miniatures or scaled-down models to control costs. Director Tony Scott refused. He believed audiences would immediately recognize the difference between real sky and fabricated spectacle. The gamble paid off. The raw, physical footage gave Top Gun its visceral power. Ironically, the Navy didn't just protect its image, it profited directly from it. The same institution that dictated script changes also collected revenue while enjoying a massive recruitment boost. It wasn't an expense, it was an investment. Number 14. Tom Cruise didn't want to pretend to be a pilot. For Tom Cruise, acting wasn't enough. He insisted on real flight training, pushing the Navy to let him experience genuine aerial maneuvers. Officials warned him bluntly, the G-forces could cause blackout. Physical conditioning wouldn't prevent it. On his first flight, crew members did lose consciousness. Cruise didn't. He returned the next day asking to go again. As training continued, he logged hours in real jets, learning barrel rolls, dives, and inverted climbs, not to perform them on screen, but to understand how they felt. When Maverick stared in awe during flight sequences, the reaction wasn't staged. Cruise was genuinely fighting to stay conscious. He later admitted he didn't need to act during those scenes. Survival did the work for him. What audiences interpreted as intensity was endurance captured on film. Number 15. Danger Zone was almost rejected. Highway to the Danger Zone became inseparable from Top Gun's identity, but it was never the first choice. The song was initially offered to multiple artists, including Toto and REO Speedwagon. Both declined. Even Bryan Adams turned it down, uncomfortable with what he saw as glorified militarism. With options running out, producers approached Kenny Loggins, who recorded the track in a matter of days. The result became his biggest hit and permanently tied his career to the film. Director Tony Scott had originally envisioned a darker, more atmospheric score. Producers Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer overruled him, demanding a fast, radio-ready anthem that could sell adrenaline. The compromise worked. The soundtrack didn't just support the film, it marketed it. Danger Zone wasn't about nuance, it was about momentum, and it helped turn Top Gun into a cultural event rather than just a movie. Number 16. A camera rig nearly caused a fatal ejection. Filming real dogfights came with risks the studio could never fully control. Heavy camera rigs were mounted inside F-14 cockpits to capture close-up shots of pilots during flight. During one maneuver, a rig loosened midair and slammed violently against the glass canopy. The pilot believed the aircraft had suffered a structural failure. For a brief moment, he prepared to eject. Ejection at that speed could have been fatal. The pilot managed to stabilize the jet and land safely, but the footage from that flight, raw, shaky, and intense, made it into the final cut. What audiences saw as heightened realism was the byproduct of a near catastrophe. Later, the director admitted the truth without romanticism. Lives had been risked for frames. The production didn't just flirt with danger, it depended on it. Number 17. The director was nearly fired mid-production. Studio executives were deeply uncomfortable with the film's emerging visual style. Smoke-filled rooms, endless sunsets, silhouetted bodies framed like fashion ads. Early dailies didn't resemble a traditional military action film. They looked abstract, indulgent, and expensive. At one point, Paramount seriously considered replacing the director mid-shoot. Executives feared audiences would reject what they saw as style over substance. Producers Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer intervened, arguing that the aesthetic was the film's identity. The director doubled down instead of pulling back. More lens flares, more golden hour shots, more visual excess. Critics later mocked the look, but audiences were hypnotized by it. What nearly cost him his job ultimately defined the movie. The risk wasn't just artistic, it was professional survival. Number 18. The enemy jets were American planes in disguise. The menacing MiGs that haunt the skies of Top Gun were not Soviet aircraft. They were U.S. Navy F-5, Tiger II jets, repainted and reframed to appear foreign. Cold War politics made authenticity impossible. No one was lending real enemy hardware to Hollywood. These planes belonged to the Navy's aggressor squadron, trained specifically to mimic enemy tactics. By altering paint schemes and filming from selective angles, the production created a convincing illusion of hostile airspace. Most viewers never questioned it. Even aviation enthusiasts were fooled. The deception worked because it aligned with the film's broader strategy: blend reality with theater until the line disappears. What looked like geopolitical authenticity was controlled illusion. American steel, dressed as an enemy, selling a narrative the audience was ready to believe. Number 19. Critics rejected it. Audiences didn't care. When Top Gun premiered, critical reception was cold. Major publications dismissed it as shallow spectacle. Some reviewers labeled it a feature-length recruitment commercial, polished but empty. The story was criticized for lacking depth. The characters were seen as archetypes rather than people. But something unexpected happened. Audiences showed up anyway, then they came back. The film dominated the box office, eventually becoming the highest-grossing movie of the year. Word of mouth overwhelmed criticism. The disconnect exposed a shift. Critics were evaluating narrative substance. Viewers were responding to aspiration, speed, confidence, belonging. Top Gun didn't resonate because it told a complex story. It resonated because it sold a feeling, one that aligned perfectly with the cultural mood of the 1,980 seconds. The film proved that a movie could be critically dismissed and still reshape popular culture. In hindsight, the negative reviews didn't slow Top Gun down. They simply failed to understand what it was actually doing. Number 20. The film quietly became a tool of power. Long after its theatrical run, Top Gun continued to circulate in places most audiences never imagined. Pentagon officials screened the film for international military delegations, allies, defense partners, strategic observers. The message was never stated outright. It didn't need to be. Advanced aircraft, confident pilots, absolute dominance of the sky. The film projected American air superiority with cinematic precision. Some historians argue it played a role in reinforcing defense relationships and influencing foreign military perception during the Cold War's final decade. In that context, Top Gun stopped being entertainment. It became soft power, a weaponized myth, not created by politicians, but eagerly adopted by them. The film began as a magazine article. It ended as a global symbol. Somewhere between those 2 points, the line between cinema and strategy quietly disappeared. Top Gun was never just about speed or swagger. It was a carefully constructed fantasy, built from real danger, institutional compromise, and cultural timing. It turned a generation of pilots into icons, transformed its lead actor into a permanent symbol of control, and reshaped how blockbuster movies were made. Behind the sunglasses and jet engines was something colder: calculation, image management, influence. And that is the truth that stayed airborne long after the credits rolled.